Hi, everyone. Last week I began with the warning that what I was about to share might make you uncomfortable. Later, my wife had shared with me that it was very gloomy, and I had shared various stats and numbers and some conclusions. And, and I guess, shall I say, made 3 points. One is that a father's involvement in raising children is not just important, it's critical. That fathers have a critical role to play in raising their children. That a child needs both mother and father. Secondly, that acknowledging that we do have a huge problem in our society, absent fathers. Fatherlessness, as some would describe it. That is prevalent for a number of reasons. And number three was so that I encouraged us to honor fathers. So instead of this approach to elevate women by tearing men down, let us honor both fathers and mothers. And this, I guess, research led me to thinking, is there ways that we can compensate when fathers can't be there? What are the differences between mothering and fathering? And so I started looking, and this time it wasn't so easy in terms of to come up with anything specific. I mean, there are people with opinions and observations, but people weren't agreeing necessarily. And there was one neuroscientist that said, well, there are physical differences in male and female brains. That female brains the information tends to go, and the activity in the brain tends to go between the left and the right hemisphere back and forth, where men tend to be more lateral, just along one side. And so, while there might be some basic biological differences, what I also found was that even when there were trends, there were elements that seemed to throw all of those trends to the wind, such as personality, cultural expectations and roles that affect parenting, your background, how you were raised, your experiences tend to affect how you parent, trauma, and how you've responded, shall we say, and whether you've healed or you're still reacting, that affects your parenting. And of course, how experienced you are at parenting affects your parenting, and the age of your child affects some people, right? It's a very common thing for men to seem to draw closer to their child after the child sort of leaves the infancy stage. Once they become able, mobile, move around, they tend to be more involved. But again, right, sort of a trend, but those things affect maybe how we respond. And with all that said, here I just wanted to briefly share some of the differences that some people observe. One is that mothers are more nurturing than fathers. One site I know talked about the idea that mothers are nurturing and fathers are encouraging. Another one talked about mothers being inward focused and fathers outward focused. Sort of like, I was thinking, well, maybe that's like when I was comforting a child, I'd hold that child close to me, but as soon as they settled down, I'd turn them around and they would look outward, away from me, not in toward me, but away from me. And I would hold them that way, and we would walk around together looking at the same thing together. We'd be side by side together, but looking outward at our world, and they would see what I would see. There are, of course, other things that some would say, well, mothers are more in the moment and affirming, where dads are more, well, how's that going to affect down the road? Another mothering expert, she teaches that children look to their mothers for wisdom and to their fathers for acceptance. That mums are to provide the wisdom to help a child manage their feelings and life's challenges. So they are to help a child regulate their emotion to solve life's problems, where this person said, but fathers are there to provide acceptance, to provide the ingredients for self-acceptance and self-worth and confidence. So what that really looks like, then they would say that a wise mom would say to her child, yes, you're feeling that way. Yes, let's talk about why you're feeling that way. Let's talk about how to help you through this so you don't end up in this same place in the future. And so wise mothers are trying to liberate their children from ignorance, time and again, where the dads are there about acceptance. She says that if dad tells them they did good, it's a big deal because dad's big and strong and he knows how to work really hard, this kind of idea. These are her words. And she says, right, and then the child goes, well, I think this is a big deal. Dad said it's a big deal. And I can do this more often. I've been accepted by dad. But of course, the thing is, if dad isn't there and dad doesn't provide that, then they go looking for acceptance so often in all the wrong places. So that's a little bit of what's out there. Not all of it, but some of what's out there. What does Scripture have to say? There's a passage in Titus that you can read, but I'm just going to, in Titus 2, 1-8 on your own time, but I will read from Proverbs chapter 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for gaining understanding, words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. So if we look at some of the specific advice for parents, I want to begin, I think we see a dual role as parents. That first of all, we need to learn to do what is right. And then secondly, to pass that on to our children. Okay? I've got to learn it so I can pass it on. Secondly, we are taught we need to, or shall we say, we need to learn the appropriate balance between the appropriate balance of authority and discipline. In Proverbs 13:24, we read, if you refuse to discipline your son, it proves you don't love him, and otherwise you're going to be prompt to discipline him. All right, so what does that mean? You don't engage in permissive parenting. Ephesians 6:4 says, and now a word to you parents, don't keep on scolding and nagging your children, making them angry and resentful. Rather, bring them up with a loving discipline the Lord himself approves, with suggestions and godly advice. Colossians 3:21, fathers, don't scold your children so much that they become discouraged and quit trying. These verses I'm reading from the New Living Bible, but this idea then also is don't be authoritarian. Don't be hard. But to find the balance that we call authoritative parenting. So teaching and discipline that's down the middle rather than being on either extreme. And we often see in generations, they tend to go one way or the other. Perhaps in the past it was more authoritarian in many homes. And now it seems like more recently we're experiencing the problems of too much permissive parenting and helicopter parenting. And so if we're going to, we're called to that place, and the other, I guess the other part of this is that if we're going to parent well, we need to, as we're talking about, learn these things ourselves. And Scripture talks about some things that we need to learn. And one of those things is the idea of distress tolerance and emotional regulation, right? Because we've all experienced that in parenting. If you're with a baby, you just go to lay them down. You got them to sleep, you lay them down, and they wake up and they start crying again. And you're exhausted. You're tired. And yet there you are with this baby screaming, right? You have to be able to manage your own stuff, your own emotions. And so Scripture really warns us, particularly with anger and anxiety. But we read passages like, from Ecclesiastes 7:9, don't be quick-tempered. That is being a fool. Psalm 37:8, stop your anger, turn off your wrath. Don't fret and worry. It only leads to harm. In Proverbs 16:32, it is better to be slow-tempered than famous. It is better to have self-control than to control an army. Colossians 3:8, but now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other. So this idea that we need to be able to regulate our emotions and behave appropriately, right? And regulating our emotions really helps with that. And the Bible also comes at it from a more positive way in Colossians 3:12 that says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with one another. Forgive one another. It goes on to say, put on love. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Be thankful. Right? All of these things that are good if you're a parent, for sure. And then it goes on to say, in that context of all, right, teach and admonish one another with all wisdom, right? Have that balance in your teaching, and it needs to come not from an angry spirit or an anxious spirit, but a loving, kind, gentle, peaceful, even-keeled spirit. And so to achieve this kind of thing in ourselves, that we need to first of all be growth focused as Christians. In Ephesians 4:23 and 24, now your attitudes and thoughts must all be changing for the better. Yes, you must be a new and different person, holy and good. Clothe yourself with this new nature. Okay, so we need to be growth focused. Secondly, if we're going to be growth focused and to move into this new us, if you will, on an ongoing basis, one is we have to be willing to admit our mistakes and our shortcomings. Proverbs 28:13, a man who refuses to admit his mistakes can never be successful. But if he confesses and forsakes them, he gets another chance. Right? The idea we have to be willing to acknowledge them in ourselves and then do that hard work of being able to acknowledge that before others. Secondly, to seek advice on how to do things well. I like Ecclesiastes 10:10. It says, a dull axe requires great strength. Be wise and sharpen the blade. All right? Get some advice. Lots about life that isn't instinctual. Parenting isn't all instinctual. Instinct means you'll just do sort of so often what you received. Good and bad. The Proverbs 14:8 says, a wise man looks ahead. The fool attempts to fool himself and won't face the facts. Proverbs 23:22, listen to your father's advice and don't despise an old mother's experience. All right, so look and learn from others. And then so as we get that sort of pulled together, as we're working on those things, I just want to say one last thing. So I'm really trying to shorten this up. But the idea is that there's one more priority Scripture talks about as a parent. Well, that I want to talk about at least today. And that is to make your marriage a priority. In Hebrews 13:4, honor your marriage and its vows and be pure, for God will surely punish all those who are immoral or commit adultery. Proverbs 5:18, be happy. Yes, rejoice in the wife of your youth. Ephesians 5:21, honor Christ by submitting to each other. And so to summarize this, as I'm trying to go through quickly, but to summarize this, that we have a dual role as parents. To learn to do what is right and wise, and of course, and to begin to do that. And secondly, to pass this on to our children and so that they are better prepared for life than what we received. And so if we want to accomplish this, we need to seek, to learn, to practice the appropriate balance of authority and discipline. If we're going to teach that, we need to find that balance. Not permissive, not authoritarian, but authoritative. And to help us in all of that, it's about who we are, rather than just skill sets, do this or do that kind of thing. It's about who we are, who we've become, that we need to be people of character. We need to learn the skill of self-control. We need to learn what it means to be able to tolerate distress and have emotional regulation. And then second, recognizing who we are matters. Qualities like kindness and compassion and gentleness and patience and gratitude and being forgiving and loving, right? Just to name some of those things, building these things. And if we're going to achieve this, both the emotional regulation and these other characteristics in our lives, we must be growth focused, right? The idea that it isn't, oh, this is who I am, live with it, but it's the idea that we are growing, that we are willing to admit our mistakes, and that we seek advice on how to do things well, including parenting. It's not simply instinctual, something that we can learn and do a better job at. And lastly, Scripture talks about if you're going to be a successful parent, right, then you need to make your marriage a priority. That this is an important thing. As much as it depends on you, right, you want to make your marriage a priority. And so I think we can do that a couple of ways as we think about parenting and marriage in that intersection is that you want to choose a mate that is growing in their character, right, that you think will make a good parent. And then I think while you are together and you're parenting, right, so that you continue to parent well, and as a united front, you need to make your marriage a priority. So I hope as I say this, right, that I recognize that life, it doesn't always work out the way we plan. There are difficulties. There's situations when we parent that the other person we're working with won't cooperate. Things that are out of our control. And so recognizing that at the end, right, that we still need to be going to God and seeking advice and wisdom and understanding, and to be doing the best we can in the present situation that we find ourselves. Thanks for listening.